Believe it or not, a modicum of bipartisanship still exists within the Congress, but you might have to dig beyond the mainstream headlines to find it. They're called the Problem Solvers Caucus. They backed the January 6th commission, which eventually was shot down by Senate Republicans. Congressman Fitzpatrick, can anyone join? And what are you signing on to if you agree to be a member of the caucus?
Hey, Michael, good morning. Good to be with you. So can anyone join? Anyone can ask to join, but to actually become a member has to be approved by the group, first by me and Josh as co-chairs, and then by the group as a whole. And they have to have demonstrated some interest in crossing the aisle and have demonstrated some courage in breaking with party leadership. The caucus has to accept them. What are they being asked to do? Stand with our country first and not be driven by any political ideology. Represent the people back home and of the country, and nobody in Washington, D.C. and no other elected official. That's what they're being asked to do. When we get to 75% of the caucus agreeing, you have to vote as a block together.
Okay, so in other words, that's really interesting. Congressman Gottheimer, you get together and decide, say, how you look at an issue like whether there should be an investigation into January 6th. And if 75% of the group agree, if I'm part of the 25%, nevertheless, I've committed to go along with the will of that 75%.
That's exactly the idea, Michael.
What is a pay for or a tax raise, something to pay for this bill that Republicans and Democrats agree on? Because we have yet to hear that.
Well, we've talked about, as you know, closing the tax gap. The IRS has said that's $1 trillion a year. Larry Summers has put out a different number on that. That's going after tax cheats. You know, there are global rates we've looked at as well. There are other user fees.
Congressman Fitzpatrick, I didn't get your answer on whether or not you support instituting a 15% minimum corporate tax.
That depends on what it's packaged with, Jacqueline. Stand alone with nothing else. You know, it's got to be a product of a compromise.
Representative Young Kim, 21 to watch in 2021, definitely among the most moderate members of this freshman class.
I came to Washington to get things done in a bipartisan way, so I kept my promise by hitting the ground running, like with my like-minded members on both sides of the aisle.
Welcome to my office.
It's really exciting. My first focus will be to ensure that Congress work on bipartisan solution. The second thing is to work across the aisle and get to know my colleagues.
What are some of the highlights you would like to share from your first year in office?
Sure. First of all, I focused on building relationship with my colleagues. Across the aisle. And one of the first thing I did was to keep my promise that I made to my constituents back home, and that is to work in a bipartisan way and bring the independent leadership they deserve. So I found the venue in the Problem Solvers Caucus. It's a bipartisan caucus with equal number of Democrats and Republicans. We come together regularly and we go through the legislation that we're sponsoring, co-sponsoring, or joint letters to support our initiatives. I'm so glad that you are the Democratic member ranked as the most bipartisan member, but I'm the Republican freshman ranked the most bipartisan member by Axios, right?
My opponent went to Washington claiming to fix these problems, but it's not to be trusted because he made promises and he just is not keeping it.
I'd really like to focus on what you would do as opposed to accusations about your opponent.
Sure. And thank you for, addressing those issues. Bipartisanship is really important, especially when you're elected to represent the people. And when I served in the state assembly, I have a record of working across the aisle, working with Democrats.
And so I support working on a targeted bill that actually fixes our infrastructure. I said enough is enough. Leaders' words have consequences, and the leaders has to be very sensitive about what they say. I said enough is enough. Leaders' words have consequences, and the leaders has to be very sensitive about what they say. I said enough is enough. Leaders' words have consequences, and the leaders has to be very sensitive about what they say.
You have something that we don't always see, Josh, which is Republicans sort of dipping into procedure, trying to explain, like, you know, in the formulation that really haunted John Kerry, for it and against it. Oh, well, I'm for part of it, not all of it. I couldn't really be for it. That would suggest that to some degree, at least today, they're on defense, Josh.
I think they're definitely on defense. And, you know, there is a freshman representative from California named Young Kim, who, you know, kind of a fresh new face in the GOP. And she put out a statement after voting no for this, where she said, I totally support infrastructure. In fact, I helped write this bill, but I'm going to vote. I voted against it. Why? Because there was another bill that I don't support. Well, that makes no sense. I mean, she was for it before she was against it, and she wrote it before she was against it.
Instead, it is one focused on an agenda cloaked under the guise of the term infrastructure. This bill is all about Green New Deal mandates. In fact, for every $2 spent, $1 of that goes to meet these mandates. The bill rejects widely supported bipartisan project streamlining provisions that would save taxpayer dollars. The bill creates 41 new programs and adds dozens of new eligibilities to existing programs for progressive priorities.
Sometimes you got to take a little bit of blood, and sometimes you got to take, take those hits in order to keep those windows open. So again, I really congratulate the president, because what he did was extremely difficult. I really congratulate Chairwoman Jayapal, who was put in a pretty impossible position. I congratulate the speaker for delivering 13, I believe, Republican votes for President Biden's agenda.